Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really elite executive coaching framework from leadership advisor Booker Farrier. Have you ever just stared at an urgent email, totally frozen because you couldn't decide whether to act fast or dig deeper into the data? Well, we're going to completely dismantle that exact feeling today. It's actually one of the biggest myths in leadership and decision-making. If you've ever felt stuck trying to balance the quality of your thinking with the speed of your execution, you're definitely going to want to stick around. We're looking at exactly how top-tier execs successfully navigate this massive tension between deep analysis and rapid action. Let's just get right into it.
Okay, so let's dive into that exact internal struggle that traps, honestly, so many emerging leaders. You know the one? Should I think deeply or should I decide quickly? The thing is, this represents a fundamental and pretty widely accepted false assumption. It's this pervasive idea that there literally has to be a trade-off between thorough analysis and decisive action. Most leaders just naturally assume they have to pick a lane, right? Either you choose deep judgment and analysis, or you choose fast, decisive action. And, as Farrier points out, because we firmly believe we have to choose, we end up over-optimizing for one side while completely struggling with, and often entirely neglecting, the other.
And you see this play out all the time. When faced with a high-stakes choice, leaders consistently over-index on one of these two extremes. I mean, we've all worked with a leader who leans way too far into depth, right? They're always gathering more data, waiting for absolute clarity, hesitating the second the path isn't perfectly obvious. And the result? Sure, they're incredibly thoughtful, but man, they are painfully slow. Opportunities just pass them by, and eventually, the whole organization labels them as indecisive. Then, you flip a coin and you have the opposite extreme, the leader who just shoots from the hip. They're all about speed, quick calls, aggressively avoiding overanalysis. But the catch? Their judgment usually feels super shallow to the rest of the team. When things get tough, their decisions just don't hold up under scrutiny. So, ultimately, neither extreme actually works.
Which brings us to what Farrier brilliantly calls the judgment paradox. The reality is, the leaders who successfully advance at major career inflection points, they don't choose. They realize that at senior levels, you absolutely need both. You need that principled, systems-aware depth of thinking, and at the exact same time, you need clear, forward-moving speed. But here's the real kicker. You don't get both just by working harder or trying to think faster. Brute force is not going to solve this paradox. You can't just, chug 3 more espressos and magically hope to become a brilliant philosopher and an action hero all at once. It just doesn't work that way.
Instead, the execs who actually advance, the ones who seem to effortlessly juggle massive responsibility, they do it by building what's known as judgment architecture. It's essentially the visible structure behind exactly how you think through decisions. It's about actively shifting away from just relying on gut instinct or some hidden internal logic that only makes sense in your own head, and moving toward an observable, highly reliable structure that your whole team can understand. When you have this architecture solidly in place, your team sees exactly how you got to your conclusion, and that builds immense trust.
So how do we build this? Well, this architecture naturally breaks down into 3 really distinct components. First up, your principles. These form your overarching framework and establish your baseline beliefs. Second is your process, which is driven entirely by the questions you ask to filter information. And third is your position. That's the final call you make in the actual reasoning behind it. When you master these 3 pieces, your speed suddenly doesn't look like recklessness anymore, and your depth doesn't look like hesitation. People just start to implicitly trust both the quality of your thinking and your decisiveness. Let's actually break these down one by one so you can start using them.
Starting with principles. This is all about establishing the beliefs that guide your trade-offs before you're in the heat of the moment. Consider a guiding principle like, if the cost of delay exceeds the cost of error, choose speed. So imagine you're deciding whether to push out a minor software update. If delaying it completely stalls your engineering team, but a potential bug would only affect like a tiny fraction of users, your principle makes the choice for you. You move fast. Another might be prioritize the stakeholder closest to customer impact, or invest where we have an unfair advantage. By setting these trade-off rules beforehand, your framework is locked in. When you move fast based on a stated principle, your speed is instantly justified and understood by everyone around you.
Next up is the process component, and this is all about your questions. What's so brilliant here is how this just completely strips away the emotional noise. That panic of what if I'm wrong or what if I miss something? Instead, you focus your energy strictly on 3 super pragmatic questions. What do we know? What don't we know? And what can we defend? By systematically running situations through these exact questions, you make sure your analytical depth is incredibly thorough, absolutely, but you also completely prevent it from turning into endless hesitation. It puts hard boundaries around your analysis, so you know exactly when it's time to stop thinking, close the spreadsheet, and start moving.
And honestly, what's truly fascinating about this is how it fundamentally reframes your internal monologue under pressure. Most leaders are trapped asking themselves these really anxiety-inducing questions like, do I have enough data? Or should I wait for more clarity? Those questions are inherently paralyzing because, let's face it, there is always more data out there. The far better question, the one that actually solves the paradox is, do I have a principled framework that allows me to decide right now and defend it later? You're actively moving away from that unanswerable anxiety about having enough information and shifting into an empowering, actionable focus on structure.
Which brings us to what Farrier calls the equation of executive presence. And it breaks down exactly why those extremes we talked about earlier fail so spectacularly. Think about it. Speed without frameworks? That's literally just recklessness. Frameworks without decisiveness? Well, that's the textbook definition of analysis paralysis. But frameworks, combined with decisiveness, that right there is true executive presence. It proves that the gap between a struggling middle manager and a highly trusted senior exec isn't raw intelligence. Everyone is smart at that level. The real game changer is having a structure that lets you operate at your peak, even when everything around you is incredibly uncertain. So how do we actually put this into practice? Well, I'm going to challenge you to apply this precise 3-step structure to 3 real decisions this week, just to see the impact for yourself. Step 1. Clarify your core principle to establish your depth right up front. Step 2. Apply those 3 process questions we discussed to filter out the noise. And Step 3. Make the call visible. Clearly state the decision, share your reasoning, and name exactly what metrics you're going to monitor. Seriously, try doing this just 3 times this week. You'll be amazed at how this level of transparency drastically shrinks your fear of being wrong, and how clarifying that core principle just supercharges your execution speed.
Ultimately, the real unlock here isn't about just being faster, and it definitely isn't about being inherently smarter or, polishing up your charisma. It's realizing a really powerful truth. True executive presence, the exact kind that top-tier CEOs leverage every single day, is simply judgment architecture made visible. CEOs don't have some magical crystal ball. They just have a highly visible framework. They don't rely on pure instinct. They build these frameworks, they make principled calls, and they move with absolute conviction because their architecture inherently supports them. And that gives their teams profound confidence.
So before you face your next major career move or tackle that next big project, ask yourself, are you going to keep hoping your gut instinct doesn't fail you? Are you going to keep optimizing for just one half of the paradox? Or are you going to build the architecture that makes your leadership undeniable, guaranteeing both strategic depth and execution speed? The choice is totally yours. Test this framework out this week, make your structured thinking visible to your team, and step into an entirely new level of leadership clarity. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.